Hi, everybody. This is Henry A.J. Ramos, the Artistic Director and Chief Curator at Studios on the Park in beautiful downtown Paso Robles. We're very privileged today to continue our virtual discussion series with two extremely talented artists. I've got Corinne Lightweaver from Culver City and Marsha Shaw from San Francisco. Welcome, ladies. Thanks for making time for me today.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'm anxious to continue a series of virtual conversations we've been having with artists in our community, as well as featured artists that we'll be partnering with in our Atrium show. And in our June show, you two, with two other artists to be named shortly, are going to help us reopen after a long and painful 2.5 months of being closed. We're going to be opening slowly but surely in this uncertain moment, but our show is going to be titled Reweaving Our Tattered Social Fabric. And tattered indeed we've been over recent months. And the show is designed to kind of lift up the voices and the points of view of very talented women artists across our state, featuring works that were not done specifically for the COVID moment, but that really, I think, speak to the mood and the measure of this moment. So I want to thank you profoundly for making that talent available to us. But first, before we dive into the show and its contents, which I want to urge you to share, I want to talk to you individually and introduce you to our audience, just in terms of some of the informative influences that have shaped your work and some of the guideposts and goals of where you're going to be going. So let me start first with Corinne Lightweaver. Yeah, Corinne, you are a really multi-talented person, as is Marsha. You're an artist, but you're also a writer and an editor, and you've done curation work. You have a broad range. You've worked in ceramics, you've done illustration, you've done digital assemblage and embroidery, but I know you most, and we're going to feature you most in our June show for your magnificent collage work. Can you tell us a little bit about your informing influences and sort of how you define yourself as an artist and what you're trying to accomplish?
So yeah, my definition of myself as an artist is constantly changing. The first thing I ever wanted to be was an artist. I remember when I was 5 years old and I took a class at Los Angeles County Museum of Art.
Wow.
Those classes were really available at low cost for people into the institution. And somewhere along the way, that initial impulse got buried. I got interested in writing, and when that changed was when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I was going to support groups and trying to find, specifically writing support groups. And it wasn't working for me because I was a professional writer and I could not get in touch with my emotions. And I got involved with an art therapy group instead. And that we had assignments, and for a while, nothing really evolved until I started collage. And then that just began opening up worlds in myself that I couldn't access before, and emotions. It's really an unconscious process for me. And after I finish a piece, I stand back and look at it.
Fascinating.
And that leads to it.
Do you think, I mean, not to press you too hard on this if you don't want to talk about it, but, you know, being a breast cancer survivor and facing life and death in that way, do you feel that heightened your consciousness about, you know, what role art could play as a therapy and as a form of getting in touch with those emotions? I mean, can you talk a little bit about what that journey was like and sort of where you've taken it?
It definitely heightened it. I kind of skipped over when I was in my 30s, and I was severely depressed and really not able to function much. I found out that the local community college was offering free classes to people that were getting public support. And so I went looking for something professionally oriented, and it was, those classes were closed. And so I signed up for a drawing class. And somewhere in there, my hands were shaking because I was newly on medicine. And I hadn't thought about myself as an artist for a really long time. And one day I did a drawing with my shaking hand that just totally intrigued me. And I thought, this is, I don't have to draw a straight line. That's not what art's about. And that the drawing led to painting, led to ceramics, and all those different explorations. I'm feeling a call to start painting again, but collage is certainly my main medium.
Wow, what a story. I mean, it's so profound. And I'm sure that listeners and observers would find your story, nothing short of breathtaking and inspiring. I mean, I think this is something that is, it speaks to the power of creativity in the human life and in the community life. And we're very happy that you not only are a survivor, but that you've turned a lot of the grief and much of the depression into wonderful imagery and content that not only you can benefit from, but that everyone else benefits from as well.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that honest story. It's really profound. Marsha, tell us a little bit about your formation and sort of what drove you to become the artist that you've become, and how did you prepare yourself in that process?
Well, I've always been kind of artsy, and mostly the things that I did as a child growing up, I did a little bit of drawing, but mostly what I did was women's type art. I taught myself how to crochet, how to embroider. I made quilts, that kind of thing.
Beautiful.
So I did that for a long time. And then there was a long period of time where I didn't do any art at all because I went to Cal Poly in the agricultural department. So
wow, that's a far cry from your creativity,
yeah,
huh?
It was totally a far cry. And so, so what happened was for me was that I had a middle management job that was very creative. I was a special events coordinator for a department store in San Luis Obispo called Gotchak's. I had been there for 13 years. And they were getting rid of their middle management people. So as a special events coordinator, I was that middle management person. Yeah. So I got put back on the floor again, which was kind of sad. And also I was working part-time. So one day on my way home, I went to pick up a pizza. And as I was sitting having a glass of wine waiting for the pizza, I was looking at this watercolor painting. And I told the woman at the desk, or the person who took my order, I said, wow, I really like that painting. And she said, oh, I did that. And out of the blue, I said, do you teach? And she goes, yeah, actually I teach at Cuesta College. You should come and take my class.
And the rest is history, sort of.
It was like, yeah, it was. So I started taking, since I was working part-time, I started taking 2 classes a semester. And I did that for the next 10 years. Amazing. While I was working part-time. Yeah. So it became a passion for me, actually. And one of my teachers that I really liked, I asked her what I should take next. And she said, you need to get out of here because you need to go to the next level. And living in San Luis Obispo, there was no next level because Cal Poly didn't have an art department at that time.
Correct.
So
your options were very limited here in this region. You had to go somewhere else if you were going to grow.
Right. Yeah. So out of the blue, my mother gifted myself and our siblings $10,000 apiece. And I called my sister and I said, what should I do with all this money? And she said, go back to school and get a degree. And my mom was still living in the San Fernando Valley. And so she needed some help. She was in her 80s. And so I applied to Cal State Northridge, which was 5 minutes away.
Yeah.
And
very practical.
Went back to school and lived with my mom until she passed away.
Yeah.
So
what a story.
Anyways, yeah. So that's how I got started.
That's a great story.
It was an amazing experience for me because all of a sudden, like, the teachers thought I was so fantastic, and I'm like, just
well, weren't you?
Well, yeah, I don't know about that, but I know.
Were you doing print work at that time? Because I mean, we know you, and we're going to present you in our show in June as a master printmaker. But like Corinne, you have broad breadth and other dimensions,
Yeah,
of prints, and you do cards and artist books that are just spectacular and
right.
intriguing.
I do a lot of different things, and one of my teachers, when she wrote a letter of recommendation for grad school for me, she did say that I was gifted. She thought I was gifted in that when I learn a process, I learn it, and then I move on to another
Mm-hmm,
process.
mm-hmm.
So, and it's actually really helped me in my art making, my teaching, and because I'm not just a printmaker, I do a lot of different kinds of art. And so someone will come into the studio where I work as a in the printmaking department,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll be stuck on something, and I'll suggest something that is not within the printmaking realm,
Yeah,
but definitely it gives them a whole different view of what they're looking at. So
exactly.
it's like a lot of the things that I do kind of overlap in some ways, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So, and I love teaching. That's really so that's really my favorite thing
That's
is
wonderful. Well,
and
we're going
working
to
with
be
people.
we're going to be sure to provide in this presentation your respective website addresses so that our viewers can quickly go and find your work, not only relevant to the June show that we're going to be featuring works around, but the broader bodies of work that you guys have so impressively put together.
Mhm.
Let me shift gears a little bit, just because we're obviously talking in a moment that is unique in history. We're in the passage of this terrible COVID-19 challenge, crisis, if you will. And many people that I'm talking to in the creative space are kind of shut down. They don't quite know how to even produce or what to produce. And others I know are being remarkably productive. So, Corinne, let me start with you. How is this moment affecting you in terms of your productivity and also maybe your interest in what you want to present in the next phases of your work? Is it having any impact?
I think it will have an impact later on. A lot of my experiences
Mm-hmm.
come out in my artwork later on, but we're talking about women's art here, and
Correct.
I think that there's so much art that women do that is not categorized
Mm-hmm.
as
Mhm.
much.
Say more about
Cooking,
that. That's an intriguing statement. I want to riff on that a little bit.
yeah, cooking and sewing, and I'm doing a
Mhm.
lot of that right now.
Beautiful.
Uh,
Oh my.
I started, and when I do it, I feel close to my mother, who died a few years ago.
Wow.
Um,
That's poignant.
she was a home ec major.
Mm.
She cooked amazingly. She made things like sugar eggs. She did ceramics. Um, she sewed lots of things, and those got pushed to the side when she had to go work.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
she taught me how to cook, and those things have been part of my life. They go through ebbs and flows, but right now I'm sewing masks, and I'm
Wow, that's
thinking about,
fantastic.
she would have done that in this period of time. Um,
So your mom continues to inspire you. I mean, really,
she does,
she's the source in many respects for your impulse to say, what would mom do?
right, and really the source of a lot of creativity.
That's marvelous.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that it's really instinctively you find comfort and creativity in some of the things that you have talked about that traditionally have been associated with women. And in a measure, I'll be very frank, and I hope it's understood in the spirit that it's meant. I mean, the purpose of our show in June is to acknowledge that in times of crisis, we look to our women to make sense of it. We look to our women to be the sources of comfort, continuity. And, to their great credit, women have never let us down. They always step up to that moment. It's too bad that more in society isn't supportive along the way in between the crises. But I think your points are really well taken and inspirational. As a woman artist, I'll come back to you on this point in a minute, Marsha, but Corinne, as a woman artist, what is your experience facing either direct or indirect discrimination or exclusion or double standards in the field? That have you experienced that, or has that been an issue in your journey?
It hasn't so far.
I'm thrilled to hear that.
Or, I mean, it may have, but it's not something that...
Not something that you're totally aware of or mindful of. Marsha, I want to learn more about your specifics, but on that particular point, as a woman artist, have you bumped into walls or limitations along the way that are
Not
in
so
your
much in
mind
my,
because of
not,
gender?
yeah, not so much in my undergrad. I did an undergrad at Cal State Northridge. I also did a master's for 2 years. And then I did an MFA at CCA. So the first 4 years were fine because there were a lot of women in the department. So I got a lot of support.
That's great.
And, but when I went to CCA, it was a lot different. For one thing, it was not only, it was interesting in that I felt like there was some age discrimination because I was 55 and they were all younger than me. I was the oldest person in
How courageous of you.
Yeah, in the school. So, whereas at Cal State Northridge, which is very diverse, I was like accepted as an older person, like as a mentor, because I had certain experiences that they had not. But when I went to CCA, which is a private art school and not diverse, not as diverse, it was a completely different feeling. So I felt very isolated for a long time. Wow. And ultimately I connected with an artist who lived in the Bay Area, whose work I admired, and she became a mentor for me.
Wonderful.
She didn't work for the school per se, but I had emailed her and asked her, and they paid her to come see me, you know, and mentor me. So it was
spectacular.
Really good.
Mentorship is so vital and important in all directions.
It really is.
Let me ask you, Marsha, the question that I asked to Corinne earlier about how this COVID-19 passage is affecting your work and your plans. Is it having any bearing on what you're doing and what you're thinking about doing?
Well, for me personally, it's been great because the COVID-19 has not been great, of course. Yeah. But as far as being at home, I'm very, I work a lot. I'm very creative, and part of my practice has been in the last 10 years is collecting prints that people have thrown out, saving paper, end cuts, that kind of thing, and painting on them and working on them. And I've been saving them for years. So I have flat files full of, stuff to do. And so what happened was when we were asked to stay at home, I have a lot of materials here at the house, which is basically my mini studio.
It's very fortuitous. You're able to work without having to leave, you know?
Yeah, I don't have to leave at all. And I taught a lot of workshops over the years, so I have a lot of materials in general anyways. But I've made probably about 35 different collages. I've been trying to do a collage a day. I made a bunch of artist books.
That's impressive, a collage a day while you're working on other things.
Yeah.
I'm jealous.
Yeah. No, I don't have a problem with working at night. Anyways, after work, I have to do something other than what I did at work.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Wonderful. Let me ask you guys, if I can, in the short remaining time that we have, to talk a little bit about the show coming up in Paso Robles in June and the important offerings that you're bringing forward and sort of the process that you follow to produce these works, your technique. Corinne, let me start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about the offerings that we're going to be featuring under your signature in June and what the through line or the kind of the shared properties of those works are in terms of your technique as well as what you're trying to say with them?
Well, I start with just stacks of material and going through them, or either fabric, I use leather, and I use magazines.
Wonderful.
And I usually don't know what I'm doing till towards.
So you don't do any studies in advance. You don't do kind of micro pieces that then become enlarged. You just go with your natural flow. I love that. That's impressive.
Yeah. And what I hope people get out of it is the strength and creativity that comes out of adversity, I think is very relevant for this period.
Yes, that is profound, and I think could not be better stated. That is really, I think, the direct connection between your lived experience, your artwork and creativity, and the moment that we're in historically that this show will speak to. So thank you for nailing it down to that essence. We're really excited about the body of work, and you can't see this because we're taping, but when this is produced and made available to the public, there will be visuals of your respective works that will be popping in and out to visualize for people what we're talking about. And I know they'll be excited when they see that work. What about you, Marsha? How would you respond?
Can you repeat that question one more time?
What was my question?
I
was kind of trying to get a sense of the body of work that you're going to be offering in June, and what drove you to produce it and what it should say to us.
Well, the drive to produce is kind of just the way I am, you know. But as far as the collages themselves, they really reference quilts and women's work, some maps maybe. Yeah. But I would say that I'm very inspired by quilt making, by textile work. And so I don't necessarily sketch in a sketchbook, but I do paint and put collages in a sketchbook, and sometimes I use those as reference. So
those are source materials, not exactly like you're replicating them, but you're using elements or inspiration from those smaller pieces,
right. And a
in
lot
larger
of times,
context.
Yeah, I'll look through magazines and cut out like patterns, and because I love pattern. And so I'll cut out patterns or objects that I think are interesting. And I have a big book of stuff like that I keep. Also works of other artists that I like to look at.
Wonderful.
And
who are your inspirations? I'm going to come back and ask Corinne this question in a second. Do you have 2 or 3 that you can share with us that might be known artists that might be reference points? No pressure. I mean, we all have our inspirations. I know I've got mine.
I do, but I can't think of them.
No worries. That happens to me all the time.
Nervous. But I think if I were to look back and think about my best inspirations, they would have been the instructors I had at Cuesta College, and also the teachers I had at State.
Yeah, what a great testament to arts education and the role of those teachers and faculty members, right?
When my first semester in grad school getting my MFA, I had a visiting artist come and see me, and she asked me why I decided to get my MFA, and I said, because I want to teach. And she said, well, you can't say that, you know, you're not supposed to say that. And I said, well, I didn't say that when I applied. I knew that was not
you learned that along the way.
Now I'm in grad school. I can say whatever I want, and the bottom line is I can't teach without an MFA. So and I did teach for 8 years at a community college, and it was very rewarding at the time. But
let me, if you don't mind, I'm going to turn real quickly to Corinne for her thoughts on her inspirations, because we're running short on time and I've got to wrap shortly.
Okay.
No slide intended, but Corinne, in fairness, who would be some inspirations for you that we might know about that have influenced your work?
Off the top of my head, Mark Franz and Kayam Soutine.
Wonderful.
I find inspiration from artists who work in fields other than what I do. So one of the times I feel most creative is if I've gone to a furniture show at a museum, and it just the lines and the textures and everything being really different. It just makes me want to go home and start working.
I am really thrilled you said that, because oftentimes we have a tendency to kind of over-focus on our particular piece of the pie, at the risk of and at the expense of exposing ourselves to all these other things that we may not get into directly, but that could be great influences for the work that we're advancing. And that's a great example and point. Well, I want to give you guys each about a 30-second opportunity to share any closing thoughts you may have, but I do want to say that we are so very fortunate and grateful to have you coming to Paso Robles to share the magic of your creative points of view, your products. I know they're going to inspire, they're going to excite. And they're going to, I think, bring reason and meaning to a moment that a lot of us are struggling to find reason and meaning in. But let me give Corinne the first last word. Any final thoughts you want to share about the show coming up, or any aspect of your work before we sign off?
Well, I found it very interesting that Marsha had also described sort of the serendipity of the journey.
Yes.
And I hope that's one thing that visitors will take away with them, is that there's possibility. Wonderful. There's always a possibility, and you don't know what's around the corner.
Yeah.
Will excite you and take you farther on your journey.
That's beautiful, especially coming from someone that's had the lived experience that you have had. Words of inspiration and wisdom. Thank you, Corinne. Marsha, your final thoughts.
So I guess what I'd like people to take away from looking at my work is that what we've mostly missed are the human connections and stuff. And I see quilting and collaging is a way of connecting those things. And so I think right now that's why it's so important for me to work on collages, and I've done some stitched works and that kind of thing. Because we miss that human connection. And yeah, so even though it's not been that difficult for me because of my work, I do miss seeing people on a daily basis. And,
don't we all?
Yeah.
Don't we all? And this is a great way to wrap, to kind of remind ourselves about the import and the need to see creativity, art, and humanity as sources of reconnection and common bonding in a time of need. Well, you two have been as magnificent as I knew you would be. We're so grateful for your newfound friendship, for the opportunity to share your magnificent visions and works with our audience. And we will be posting your website for future reference to individuals interested in going there. I encourage them to do that. And we look forward to seeing you in Paso Robles, either physically in the presence or through the body of your work that you're sharing in June. Thank you so much for all you do. Henry Ramos, Artistic Director at Studios on the Park with Corinne Lightweaver and Marsha Shaw. Stay tuned, more news at 11, signing off.